Kickstarter is one of the most important developments in finance to come from the tech revolution. Crowdfunding has opened options for designers from everything from alternative energy to movies. For tabletop game designer Luke Crane, this was a trend he saw changing an industry, and after his own success, Luke answered the call to take his role inside Kickstarter. He's gone from game master at the table to master of games in the crowdfunding giant. Hi, I'm Joe Unger, and this is Pinball Rules Podcast, where we learn what it means to design for humans. Games and entertainment has become a key player in Kickstarter. The crowdfunding company has both changed the entertainment industry and changed because of it. In this episode, I'll talk with Luke about how games and Kickstarter are evolving together. Sergei is off this week, but in part 2 of our episode, creative commentator Trisha Williams will join the conversation to discuss what this means for the future of all design. So it's time to dream big, design a project, and join the crowd with Luke Crane.
My calling in life is game design, and so when I'm not helping people fund their games on Kickstarter, I am designing games myself and attending shows and talking to people and playtesting and all sorts of good stuff like that.
What has really separated and distinguishes tabletop design from other forms of game design?
Tabletop design is great because essentially prototyping is so easy. You can have the most complex tabletop game design, but you can prototype it with pencil and paper right there. You can just grab sheets of paper, start ripping them up, using them as tokens or chits or whatever. Maybe grab some dice out of an old Monopoly set if you need them, and you can really just start bashing out your design right there and start playing it immediately. Yeah, I've always designed mostly for RPGs, which I think are the absolute best game in the world. But tabletop in particular, I just love it because it's so tactile, so interactive, and it's so easy and accessible for design. It doesn't require any kind of special technology or special language to get involved in.
What would you say would be the differences in mindset that you've had to take as a designer going from Mouse Guard, which was yourself writing without a crowdfunding objective, versus Torchbearer that had a crowdfunding objective?
In order to really keep pushing ourselves as designers and publishers, but also to stay relevant in the community that's out there, like that we needed to enter this very public arena and try our hand at it. Fortunately, we were successful and the experiment paid off in that regard. But what I see is that, when you do enter the public arena, you can't close the door again, right? Like once you're out there in the world, you are going to be, as we keep interacting, you're going to be interacting with your backers on Kickstarter, and they're going to be commenting on the design. They're going to be telling you what you did right, what you did wrong. And so if you're not ready for that, like if your design is in a place that's still kind of fragile, and I think anybody who does design knows this place where, kind of the wrong kind of comment can just take the whole thing down, then you're not ready to be out in the public space. If you're the kind of person that can design in public and that can take all of these comments in stride and work with suggestions as they come, then you can come to Kickstarter earlier than other people. There's one side of Kickstarter which allows you to kind of field an idea to the crowd, to your backers, and say, hey, what do you guys think? Do you think this is worthy of being brought into the world? And I like those campaigns. And sometimes they work, sometimes they don't. And then the other side of it is like, okay, I have this very specific idea. I want to make this very specific thing. I need you guys to help me push it over the top. Some people call that the pre-order system, but it's really not. If we didn't fund Torchbearer on Kickstarter, it would have been very challenging to get that game out.
How did you get involved in crowdfunding?
I was keenly aware that summer that what was happening was that there was a novelty in the platform. I was watching RPGs and I was watching the platform elevate these games that wouldn't have got the same exposure elsewhere. And it didn't matter about the quality of the game. It was about this experience. As I am, I'm deeply skeptical of these things. I like to judge designs on their merits rather than on a kind of big public internet party. There wasn't necessarily no substance behind it. There's something going on. So yeah, then I came in and interviewed, and it turned out Kickstarter was looking for people who were specialists in their fields. So I was just lucky I was the first one that they brought in.
In a major studio, whether you're in any sort of entertainment, as an executive producer, you might see maybe 2 to 3 pitches a day, where you've got, as a crowdfunding platform as large as Kickstarter, you're seeing hundreds of these things, yes?
There are 663 projects live right now. I haven't looked at all of them. There are like kind of 2 moments a week when I really try to dig through stuff that is ending or launching, so I kind of just keep an idea of what's coming to the site. So that's just on my own and for kind of a curatorial purpose. And then I'm dealing with, I don't know how many creators at once. Like I can never tell. Like somebody writes in, I answer an email. Sometimes they don't come back to me for a year. Sometimes it's back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. So yeah, I'm dealing with a handful of creators kind of one-on-one personally. And my first role at Kickstarter, I was on the projects team, and all of our projects were reviewed by hand for years. I reviewed 11,000 games projects that came through. So I can tell you more about individual game projects now that I'm not doing that than I could when I was. People would always ask me like, oh, really? What's your favorite project? And I would just kind of stare hollow-eyed at them and like, I don't know. I just looked at 200 projects this week. But I developed this kind of this substrate of like game knowledge that just kind of like was deposited, written on my brain over and over and over again. I'm actually very proud of that experience now because I do, just like you're saying, like I have seen maybe more games than anybody else, like any one person, always trying to refine that sense with data and with like practical examples about what succeeds, what doesn't, what data backs it up, and then kind of gut checking that against what I've learned in the past few years. When you're out in the world, and it's not your job to look at games all the time, you develop your taste, your sense, and maybe a little bit of arrogance, being like, that game sucks, that'll never make it. But being forced to just look at a game on its outreach merits, essentially, right? So basically how well are they expressing the game? That's the top level of my job. It's really opened me. I don't know everything. I don't know what game is going to fund and what's not going to fund because there are no guarantees. I can point to signs. I can say, well, this is more likely. This is less likely. This is a good thing to do. This is a bad thing to do. I can't say that project's going to fund that it's going to make $500,000. No one can.
It sounds like one of the things that has affected you is that being exposed to all of this, that you've had to start to design the community.
Yeah, there's a little community design and thinking about that, like how we interact with backers, how we interact with project creators. Like that's the kind of top level blunt instruments. But then, right, like the playing cards thing, I was watching all these playing cards projects and people were using Kickstarter to fund $10,000, $15,000, $20,000 projects for custom playing cards. And so I did a little research and they were saying, oh, crowdfunding, I can crowdfund this great idea I have for a deck of cards. There was a whole community behind it. And they were telling them like what would fly, what wouldn't, like what was against the rules, what wasn't against the rules, even stuff that wasn't even publicly in our rules that we had kind of like internal rules about stuff. They had figured it out and were giving people advice. And so I turned to one of the co-founders and said, we've got to honor this community and create a little home for them because they're great. They're just exactly what we want. They are making a thing that they really want to make and they're delivering it to a small group of people who really want to support them.
The movement away in the past year from just big, broad categories and into increasingly narrow curations. How do you feel that's impacted yourself as a designer and the designers that are using the platform?
Well, it's made me as a designer more confident about launching weirder stuff. And my games are weird as they are. Being confident to take a small design and a really kind of out there design and put it up in this public space. I think that's huge. Like creating a home for stuff like that is really important. It's very easy to point to the cookie cutter designs or I mean, if you just look at the state of board games on Kickstarter right now, like the ones that do well, they all present themselves in a particular way. I'm not going to say all the games are the same because they're not. Like I was just doing outreach in Europe and especially in Germany, right, which is this hotbed of board game design. They have this award over there called the Spiel des Jahres or something. But this award is so important and so influential that it shapes the entire design culture for this hotbed of board game design in Germany because they all want to win it, but they know that only certain types of games win it. They're gravitating toward those types of designs. And I don't want that to be the same on Kickstarter, right? I don't want that to be the fact where people think, well, only board games with miniatures fund on Kickstarter, so we've got to do something like that. I mean, that's the death of design.
In your own experience, it's more a tool that could be used to build an audience, to test the legitimacy of an idea?
I mean, there are some realities at play here for Kickstarter. The basic one is that it is an internet platform and requires you to have some kind of an audience on the internet in order to be successful. Now, that audience can come from your background. I mean, that's the easiest way. The audience could come from press and outreach that you're doing around the campaign. That's hard. Or you could just roll the dice, right? You can put up a project, hope it's fun, not have an audience, not have any outreach, and just gamble. You have the same chances of that happening as becoming a rock star. But if you set your expectations accordingly, though, and you're not expecting to put up a project that nobody's heard about and make millions of dollars, but you're putting up a modest project and you're looking for 100 people to get behind it, you're only looking to raise a few $1,000s, then it's completely feasible to put up weird and smaller ideas and not have to worry about like what the current trends are, but to begin experimenting, kind of forging your own path. But I mean, it is the real reality is about this audience. It is crowdfunding, and you need to find some path to your audience, and you need to make sure that your goals are reflective of your audience. I mean, I see a lot of people put up very, very ambitious games, massive MMOs and all these things, and with very high budgets, and they clearly haven't done any technical work on them, and they clearly haven't done any outreach or research as to like how to reach their intended audiences. But they think that just because this is a popular game type and there are many people who play this game type out there, they will all stumble upon that Kickstarter page and say hallelujah and fund it. That's not how this works.
In your experience and what you see, what are the chief differences between developing those conceptual pitches to a publisher and developing a conceptual pitch for a crowdfunding platform?
There's a lot of crossover between the two, between interacting with your potential publisher, interacting with your potential fans. But for the publisher, the game doesn't have to be done per se, but you do have to be able to go to that publisher with a very strong idea of the design and why the design is worth their time and what makes it unique. Uniquely handing a game to a publisher, there have been some success stories in that department, but they're rare. With Kickstarter, you have to acknowledge that you are the designer, you are the publisher, and you are the publicist, and you are a small business owner, essentially, who is going to have to wear all of the hats. And the skill set for design is different than the skill set for telling people about why your design is great. And it's hard, and it requires practice to communicate your design to people, and especially on an internet platform where you can't just sit down and say, okay, hey, let's play the game together. Whatever type of game it is, whether it's a 8-bit retro platformer or whether it's a tabletop game, if in person you could sit down and be like, oh, here, check this out, play at Kickstarter. You have to be able to communicate it to people. You have to be able to get them excited, not just say, oh, that's cool. Then you need to divert their attention to the money part. Right? You need to say, oh, you're really excited about this. Okay, how about $25 or how about $50? You really have to think about this. You have to design this campaign. Like, and there's some fundamental underpinnings that require some deep thought. And then on top of that, learning how to tell the story of your game and present it to people and get them excited about it. I mean, that's a whole other skill set. It's hard, but the payoff of having that direct interface with your fans and not having any intermediary, I think it's worth it. I want them to tell me about their experiences using it. I want to watch them use it. Like, I want to hear how they talk about it. I don't want that information to get back to me in some kind of echo chamber. I want to have that direct relationship. I want to be responsible for my designs from concept all the way to you playing the game.
So would that be your favorite part as a designer then? Crowdfunding as a tool that allows you to talk back and forth, to have that collaborative experience with the fans themselves? Yeah,
absolutely. Right. Well, regardless of if you want to have that, like, fans give me input on the design part, or if you just want to, like, have them support your particular vision. Either way, it's a very intense relationship. I mean, we did back in the ye olden days of like 2008, even 2010, I think, we did pre-orders for games. We thought we understood our audience, but it was really interesting, the difference of interaction between a pre-order where it's fun, like people are posting on the forums, they would laugh when they crashed our site, they thought it was funny. People would write us emails about how angry they were that they didn't get a copy from the limited pre-order or whatever. No, that was fun, but when we did Kickstarter, it's almost like we tore down a wall there was a wall between us and our fans. And even though we are so dedicated to fan interaction, right, with our forums, Twitter, and all this stuff, we want to be out there, we want to hear from people. Taking that step up from our janky ass website onto this very public platform, we were stunned, right? Because in the first few minutes of the Kickstarter, we're like, oh yeah, I know that person, I know that person, I know that person. An hour, 2 hours pass, and we're watching the backers come in. We're like, I don't know who any of these people are. How did they find out about us? And then it just kept going from there. Yeah, it's just a very different experience from selling a product on a shopping cart to kind of shepherding this idea through this kind of public display for 30 days.
So where do you think the future of crowdfunding is going in these sorts of interactions?
I think fans, backers, supporters enjoy the interaction of being involved in the kind of the narrative of the creation of the project. And I think we're going to see more of that in the general sphere of things. I think that more people are going to adopt this model. And I think it's happening right now. I mean, Microsoft just announced early access support on their own, right? This idea of being a part of something and helping to bring it to life, which is our Kickstarter motto. I think that this is a new way of quote unquote consuming something. It's not really, it's not really consuming, right? It's a different type of interaction for creating something. You're not just going to a store and buying. You're not just going to a website, click, buy. Some people have that interaction, but the quality of different interactions that you can have through a process like this is huge and very valuable. And so we're already seeing other platforms starting to adopt these models and blend them into what they're doing. And I think that the process will accelerate. I think that will continue to happen. I think on Kickstarter, the support for interactions between creator and backers will get smoother and better over time as Kickstarter starts reacting more and more to the community and their needs, and you'll start to see just better features that support how people are actually using crowdfunding. So yeah, but I think the future is that you're going to see this model, bits and pieces of this model start getting adopted in places where you didn't see it before.
Yeah, it sounds like you're describing that crowdfunding opened up an entire new segment of consumers that are not just consuming games or movies or a design product, but actually consuming the design process itself.
Yeah, that's exactly it. And again, Kickstarter didn't start this process per se, but it really facilitated it, right? It took it out into a cultural sphere. It said hey, creative projects are cool and hard and fun, and it gave a window into them, right? It said you don't have to talk about it. A lot of projects, they just make their thing and hand it off to you, but you can. And I really think that this interaction is so valuable. It's what is sustaining this model. If people could have just bought Shenmue out in the store, they would have totally. But tens of thousands of them want to be able to say that they helped get it made. Tens of thousands of them want to be involved in the process. And Shenmue will have a life after Kickstarter. Shenmue will go on sale, and it will be on consoles, and it'll be great, and they'll make a ton of money. And right now there's 41,000 people after 2 days that are so excited by the prospect of being able to help this beloved game get made, that they're willing to stump up money and make themselves a part of the design process. And so absolutely, this is a new way of interacting with quote unquote products. And it really starts to shift the definition of product too. And to what, I don't know, but it definitely, product for so long has meant something that you consume, that you pull off of a store shelf and use. But now it's this is blurring those lines.
The whole prospect of crowdfunding in general allows us to, as designers, to not only be really excited about our own discipline, right? We get to go, hey, you're out there, and we get to put it out in design phase before the finished product, allowing us to iterate faster and earlier in a process. The crowdfunding platforms available to us allow us to fail quickly and come back for more and work with that hardcore group of people who are interested in designing and find a community. Just like if we were about to put a retail shop on a neighborhood and we'd want the neighborhood's feedback, that Kickstarter and crowdfunding allows that same sort of a dialogue between designer and the people we're designing for.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's great. It's terrifying, and it will change design. It will change the way we, quote unquote, consume things.
Welcome to part 2 of the Luke Crane interview, where we're talking about the future of crowdfunding. I'm Joe Unger.
And I'm Trisha Williams.
So you've heard Luke talk about the future of Kickstarter as a design marketplace. Kind of an idea that we're going to move away from just, cranking out the same old board games or the same old ideas and pre-sales, and moving into an era where we see more interaction with the fans and backers become a part of the design process itself. What do you think about that?
I think that there's a viable place for that. I don't think Kickstarter is there yet, but I see that it can be moving in that direction. A lot of people want to be part of a process from the ground up. That's why people love watching all the behind-the-scenes making of footage. If you see how many people are following the making of the new Star Wars, it's insane. It's millions and millions of people.
Right.
The anticipation of whatever that project is going to be is sometimes even more exciting than the actual final product itself.
Right. We always talk about discoverability, right? How the anticipation of discovering what's around the corner is almost more powerful than actually seeing the finished product itself.
Kickstarter can be a portal into that involvement and anticipation, saying, oh, that's an awesome idea. Well, have you thought of this? Have you thought of this? Yes, I will back that. I will give a thumbs up to this and a thumbs down to that, and give the original creators a lot of feedback and help design it. Even when you're designing in games, a lot of times the process is still more exciting for the team than the final product. You put it out there and you're proud of it, but you're like, oh, think of all those things we could have put in there.
No, that's a good point. Like, as a creator, we get lost in the game of making things. Right, so our anticipation is all built up on, what is it going to look like when we ship it? And then we ship an album or we ship a game, and then it's kind of over. We're a little sad until we have a new project, right? And it kind of feels like Kickstarter is a machine for that.
It's the old artist saying of art is never finished. And that's part of it, because through the design process or the creation of a painting or everything, you have so much planned. You have so much that you're going to do, and all these details that you're going to put in, all these mechanics you're going to put in. But reality is, it comes down to time, it comes down to money, it comes down to manpower, and eventually you just have to say, okay, it's done and it's out. I think that's where sometimes the Kickstarters, people lose interest because they were expecting so much more delivered, or it was so fulfilled in their imagination that there was no way to deliver a product in the time and budget that it was allowed to fulfill those anticipation dreams.
Yeah, I think you see that a lot when you see coverage. It's not really about the product once it's out on market. It is kind of not a non-story in any of the newspapers or TechCrunch or something.
I've heard about so many Kickstarters that has, 1 million backers or have raised $3 million, and that they got funded 800%, and then I never hear anything about the actual finished product. That doesn't get covered the same way that the process of it being crowdfunded gets covered. And then it just sort of poofs into the ether as another piece of content that has come out.
For this to become an effective tool, not just to finance, but to improve the designs of your creative projects, what would shift in that to make it better?
I think the first thing that pops into my mind is a milestone system, is that the Kickstarter doesn't go, okay, 30 days to complete funding, and then we'll make it over this next year. Is that no, it's 30 days to milestone 1, and then you deliver milestone 1, and it's smaller, funding asks, it's smaller backer asks, and more times that you hit that milestone and they see the creation and they get more input, the backers get more input on what the next milestone will be and what's working and what's not, would help define that project and get more people along the way into the very end goal that you're not ever going to, keep going on.
Right. So milestone 1 is $5,000, and that shows the outline of our project. Milestone 2 is
a playable prototype, something that everyone can QA and give feedback on. Milestone 3 is a whole new art redo based on backer feedback. And the monetary asks are only what's going to be between milestone 2 and 3 or so.
Right. So you're actually involving the audience from day one and those first milestones, which helps you as the creator getting feedback all along the way. So you know you're serving your audience from the get-go, and it also helps the audience because they're personally involved in all of these projects along the way. Yeah, I could see that working really well.
And they would get more people involved as it goes further, and you keep delivering, and you don't gather $2 million and deliver nothing. So they know that you are keeping up with the process, and that gets more people interested. Or if you get to a point, you say that I was going to make a 400-page book, but at the end of 200 pages, everyone went, that's great, you're done now. Right. Then you're not wasting your time and wasting their money.
Well, it was like a few other interviews that we've done since Luke. We've talked to other creators that had 12 book projects, and they find themselves locked into a year of content, and people not buying or picking up the 10th or 11th book because the anticipation's gone. So, I could see a milestone system, something that you're funding each small step along the way.
Which resets anticipation.
Right, and keeps it up, right, for everything. Just think if Disney would do that with Star Wars.
Yeah.
We could fund the path. That's really interesting, yeah. Pinball Rules Podcast is recorded in San Diego, California, featuring your hosts Joe Unger, creative commentator Trisha Williams, science commentator Sergei Gepshtein, audio direction and original music by Michael David Peter, and production assistance from Laura Rapaulski. For more information on our guests and downloads, go to pinballrulespodcast.com. Pinball Rules Podcast is a copyright of Pigeonhole Productions 2015.